When my billionaire neighbor's black belt son cornered me on my own driveway, he smirked and said, "Let's see what a helpless girl like you can actually do." Everyone in our gated community gathered to watch the humiliation. They thought I was just a quiet woman who kept to herself. His father even pulled out his phone, laughing, recording what he thought would be my public undoing. But they had no idea who I really was, or the secret I'd kept buried since leaving the military. Before you hear how I put him in his place, make sure to comment below which city or state you're watching from so I can see how far this story reaches. The smirk on that boy's face vanished the exact second he threw his first punch, but the sequence of events that led to that moment started 3 weeks earlier. My name is Claire Vance. At 32 years old, most people who look at me see an ordinary, soft-spoken woman who enjoys quiet mornings, tending to her garden, and keeping entirely to herself. I recently bought a modest home in a serene, upscale suburban neighborhood, hoping to finally taste a normal, peaceful life. To my neighbors, I was just a quiet retreat ant, perhaps a writer or an artist taking a break from the noise of the city. What none of them knew, and what I took painstaking care never to mention, was the truth behind the thin white scars running up my wrists and the rigid discipline in my posture. Before retiring to civilian life, I spent nearly a decade in the military, eventually rising to lead an elite unit of Army Rangers. I spent years in high-threat combat zones, trained to execute split-second tactical decisions, survive extreme close-quarters combat, and remain absolutely motionless under fire. When I left the uniform behind, I made a silent vow to leave that violence in the past. I wanted peace. But unfortunately, trouble has a way of finding you, even behind gated fences. My peaceful sanctuary didn't stay quiet for long. Right next door lived Marcus Drake, a self-made tech tycoon whose multi-million-dollar mansion towered over my property like a fortress of unbridled ego. Marcus believed that his massive bank account granted him ownership of the entire street, but his arrogance was nothing compared to his 22-year-old son, Julian. Julian was a tall, heavily muscular third-degree black belt in martial arts who wore his athletic achievements like a crown of entitlement. He treated our quiet neighborhood as his personal training ground, constantly flexing his physical power to intimidate anyone who dared cross his path. It started with small microaggressions, Julian revving his sports car engine at 3 in the morning, intentionally parking his oversized truck across my property line, and tearing up my newly planted lawn. Whenever I caught him, he'd just stare at me with a smirk, convinced that a quiet 32-year-old woman would never have the nerve to stand up to a wealthy, trained fighter. He mistook my silence for fear. By the second week, Julian's petty antics crossed into outright harassment. I came home from the grocery store one afternoon to find his massive pickup truck parked dead center in my driveway, completely blocking my garage. I took a deep breath, stepped out of my car, and walked over to Marcus's manicured front lawn where Julian was practicing heavy bag kicks while his father watched from the porch. I kept my voice perfectly calm and polite. "Julian, you're blocking my driveway. I need you to move your truck." Instead of apologizing, Marcus slowly stood up, swirling a glass of whiskey, and gave me a disdainful look. "Listen here, sweetie," Marcus scoffed. "People like you should be grateful to live near a family like ours. My son parks where he wants." Julian dropped his fighting stance, stepped invading my personal space, and towered over me with an intimidating grin. "What are you going to do about it, weak little girl? Cry to the police?" He raised a clenched fist inches from my face, expecting me to flinch. I didn't even blink. 2 days later, the situation reached its boiling point. I was returning home from an early morning jog when I found both Marcus and Julian standing right at the edge of my driveway, completely blocking my path. Julian was dressed in his black belt martial arts gi, bouncing on his toes like he was preparing for an arena championship fight. "Hey, neighbor," Marcus called out loudly, holding up his smartphone with a malicious grin. "My son thinks you need a lesson in respect. Since you couldn't handle us parking on your side, let's see how well you handle a real man in a match." Neighbors began stepping out onto their lawns, whispered chatter spreading as a small crowd gathered to watch the scene unfold. Marcus was live streaming the entire thing, loudly boasting to his online followers that his golden boy son was about to put the quiet girl next door in her place. Julian stepped forward, cracking his knuckles with an arrogant smirk that made my blood run cold. "Come on, don't be a coward," Julian taunted, raising his hands into a fighting guard. "Just throw one punch. Let's see what a helpless girl like you can actually do." I didn't utter a single word. Years of tactical training took over as my heart rate dropped into a hyper-focused calm. Julian misread my silence as paralysis and lunged forward, throwing explosive, high roundhouse kicks straight at my head, aiming to end the fight in a single flashy move. He had no idea he was dealing with someone who had disarmed armed combatants in life-or-death scenarios. I didn't flinch. With effortless precision, I stepped inside his guard, slipping under his swinging leg. Before he could recalibrate his balance, I drove my palm sharply into his solar plexus, knocking the wind completely out of his lungs. As he gasped and stumbled, I grabbed his extended arm, executed a lightning-fast hip pivot, and slammed his heavy frame hard onto the asphalt driveway. Before he could even register what hit him, I swept his leg, twisted his shoulder into an unyielding armbar, and pinned him flat on his stomach with my knee buried deep into his shoulder blades. 10 seconds. That's all it took. The entire street fell into absolute silence. Julian panted helplessly against the concrete, whimpering in pain. Marcus stood frozen, his jaw dropped, his smartphone slipping right through his fingers and shattering on the ground. I slowly released my grip and stepped back, standing over Julian as he scrambled backward on his hands and knees, clutching his arm in sheer terror. Marcus rushed forward, his face red with rage as he pulled his trembling son up. "You assaulted my son," Marcus screamed, fumbling for his phone. "I'm calling the police. You're going to jail for the rest of your life." I calmly reached into my jacket, pulled out my wallet, and flipped open my official military credential card. "Go ahead and call them, Marcus," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet street like razor wire. "I'm Captain Claire Vance, former commander of an elite Army Ranger unit. And while you do that, make sure to tell them your son initiated an unprovoked physical assault on a veteran, an assault you just broadcasted live to thousands of people online." Marcus froze, staring at my credentials as the color completely drained from his face. The neighbors who had gathered were now whispering in awe, watching the powerful billionaire shrink under my gaze. Realizing the massive legal nightmare and public humiliation he'd just walked into, Marcus grabbed Julian by the shoulder and hastily dragged him back to their mansion, utterly broken. From that day on, Marcus and Julian never parked on my lawn, never revved their engines late at night, and never looked me in the eye again. The quiet peace I'd searched for after leaving the military was finally restored to my neighborhood, not through violence, but by standing firm and refusing to let bullies push me around. True strength isn't about bragging or picking fights to boost your ego. It's about holding the power to defend yourself and choosing discipline until you're forced to act. Now, I want to hear from you. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have kept your composure like I did, or called the police right away? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button and subscribe for more. Don't forget to click the video on your screen right now to watch another incredible story. Thank you for watching.